Alright, the piston's laying exactly the way I pulled it out, so for the time being I've scratched a couple of little arrows or V's pointing in the direction towards the side of the engine that the manifold was on, so that I'll know which way that piston rod assembly came out, what direction it was oriented, in case there is a difference. So right now I've got that scratched on there, and then maybe when I clean it up later there might be some marks on the piston that indicate which way is supposed to face which way if it is critical. And then the bearing end caps, I'll show you one of those. Alright, so here's the connecting rod end cap, and if you look on this side, there's almost a the line that goes across right here. There's actually a couple of them. There's one line right here where there's a part number stamped, and then there's also this ridge right here in the casting, which looks like, I'm not sure, but maybe that's when the way they machined it. But anyways, it's not straight across. It's actually got almost like a little curve to it, a smiley face. So I'm going to use that to indicate which way the bearing rod, connecting rod end cap came off. So I'll show that in a moment. Alright, so I'm looking up at the bottom of one of the connecting rod end caps. It's still in. This would be cylinder number 3. And you can see that little, we'll call it a smiley face that I'm looking at. And right now it looks like a frown. And the top of the frown there, right in the middle, the high point, would be facing towards the generator side or the manifold side of the engine, and the bottom would be facing the bottom of the frown. If this was a frown and this was his nose and these were his eyes and this was his chin would be facing towards the oil filter side or the blower side, and the nose and eyes up here would be up towards the generator or manifold side. Sounds corny, but that's what I'm going to do so I can keep track of how these are in there, because I noticed that all three of them are in that way. They're all facing the same way, and that makes me believe that there may be a specific way they're supposed to go on. Well, today I'm back to work on the 353 diesel. I'm going to pull the other two sleeves and pistons today and see if I can't see any obvious signs of damage. Well, bumping the starter didn't work like it did on that first sleeve in the middle, so now I got to get onto that crankshaft pulley, which means pulling this radiator, which I was going to put off until later because of these rusted bolts down here. But I got this one started. Basically, I squirted it with more penetrating fluid after I wire wheeled the threads to clean the threads up some, and then I put a torch to it and heated it up. And I don't have a acetylene or anything like that. I just use this MAP gas handheld torch, and that gets it plenty hot enough for my purposes. And now it's breaking free. Okay, the radiator's unbolted. Now I just got to disconnect this upper radiator hose up here and the lower hose down there, and then I'll be able to get the radiator out. Well, I got the upper and lower hoses disconnected, only to find out that can't get the radiator out because I can't lift it up high enough for the studs to clear the holes, the mounting holes, because the fan is hitting the shroud. No matter where I position the fan, it doesn't matter. It's hitting the shroud right in the bottom there. So my only choices is to take the fan off, which taking the fan off with the radiator in the way is, well, maybe doable, but actually I think it's going to be easier to remove the shroud. I thought the shroud was welded to it, but now upon closer inspection I see buried in the original paint here there's screws, 3 down this side and I'm assuming 3 on the other side. I don't see any screws along the top, which would hopefully mean there's no screws along the bottom, because I don't know how I'd get to them if they were. So I'm going to try and take these screws out. I'll scratch that idea.
These screws, after I cleaned them up with the wire wheel, because I thought the slots were filled with paint, I realized now it looks like lead. It looks like, right there, you can see, it looks like this is soldered. It looks like the shroud is soldered to the radiator in spots. Here, here, and there. Looks like maybe the screws are just there to hold the shroud in place when they actually do the soldering. So much for that. So plan B, I'm going to try and take the fan blade off and see if that'll, hopefully that'll come off. Okay, I've removed 4 bolts, 1/2-inch bolts in the front here that I thought would have held this blade on, but trying to get the blade off, and I can see it's trying to separate from this part here, but it's not coming off. Something's still holding it. So I'm definitely missing something here. So now I'm noticing that this whole bracket with the pulley assembly is held on by these 4 bolts here, which are a lot more accessible. 2 on this side, 2 on that side. So now my plan is I'm going to take out these 4 bolts and take this whole bracket, pulley, and fan out as an assembly. Hopefully it'll fit through here. Well, the fan hub assembly and the bracket is all out in one assembly. Basically just a matter of slipping the belts off the lower crankshaft pulley, and then the whole thing just comes right out, especially easily since I already got the radiator on board. Just tilt the radiator forward and pull it right out the top. And now with that out of the way, you can see right here is where the fan blade would be hitting when I was pulling up. Now I can get the radiator up and out. Alright, I got the radiator out. You can see it's got quite a bit of damage on the back side. You can see this is where most likely at some point a rock or a stick or something fell in there between the fan and the shroud. It doesn't take much to chew it up. And then there's a big hole here, so that's a pretty rough shape. But then I did a number by just having water in it and letting the core burst. So this is a lot heavier than I thought it was. Certainly underestimated the weight. So if you've never done one of these before, be prepared for that. Thought it was going to be a lot lighter, and it wasn't. But I got it out. Now I got a ton of room in here. Now I can get a big socket, breaker bar, and pipe extension on there to turn that crankshaft. One other quick note about this fan assembly. I still don't know why when I had these 4 bolts out, this fan blade wouldn't come off of that hub behind it, but a pulley. So I'm not going to worry about it now. I'm just going to make sure I tighten these bolts back up. So partly so I don't misplace them, and partly just so I don't forget about putting them back in. Well, I put my little metal wedges in the holes, the ports there, to block them, so that when I turn the crank it would push the sleeve out. Hoping it would work like the other one did. Put a breaker bar on there, put a cheater pipe on there, and all I ended up doing was bending my my breaker bar. It's now it can go around corners. None better. Made in the USA. I don't even know where I get that one, but unfortunately, it's a 1/2-inch drive. I've got a 3/4-inch drive socket set with a breaker bar and a ratchet in it. On my list for Christmas, it's a cheapo Harbor Freight one, but for a weekend warrior like me, it should be good enough. I don't know whether or not that would even do it though. So I don't know, I gotta rethink my strategy maybe. Either that or wait until I have my new breaker bar and see what happens. Well, I actually took my makeshift pins out of this cylinder and put them in the rear one here, and decided to try that one. And rather than putting the persuader on there, and of course I really couldn't do much more now that the breaker bar is so bent anyways, I decided to just try rocking it back and forth and tapping it slowly like this, kind of like the way I was doing it when I was bumping it with the starter, and lo and behold, it's starting to lift out. While in the process of banging it back and forth to try and get that cylinder to tap out, both of my pins fell into the air box, which if they had fallen in on this side I could have just reached in and got them through this open cylinder, but they fell in on the backside, which means I'm not going to be able to get them out of there until I get this cylinder out, the sleeve out. Also, I really managed to gall up that sleeve, but I didn't really care about the sleeve because I figured if I'm going to go through the trouble of taking this all out, I'm going to re-sleeve this thing anyways. But just food for thought, if you plan on trying to reuse your pistons in your sleeve, don't go about it the way I'm doing it, that's for sure. Well, pushing the sleeves out using the pistons wasn't working on the other two sleeves, so I decided to pull the other two pistons, and then I'm going to have to rig some kind of a sleeve puller. Since I don't own a sleeve puller, and even a used sleeve puller for this size engine on eBay runs around $400 or $500, so I'm certainly not going to buy a puller just for that. So I'll figure something out, but I did get the pistons out. This is the piston from the number 1 cylinder here, and I haven't cleaned that one up any yet. This is the piston from number 3, the rearmost cylinder. This one I cleaned up a little bit, and I can actually see some heavy scoring right here on the side. So that might have been when the engine locked up after I overheated it. So, oh well. Alright, so that's where I stand now. Next move is to get the sleeves out. I cleaned up these pistons a little bit, just got some of the oil off of them. This is piston number 1 from cylinder number 1, and it's interesting, this is the only one that's got this weird protrusion at the bottom of the connecting rod on the rod cap. So I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, but it's the only one that has that. As far as the way the bearing caps go on, which orientation they go on, that was pretty easy to figure out. I took note of it as I took them off anyways, but actually I found out when I was looking at it that it looks like these were machined as an assembly. So the machining marks, or the marks here on the side, actually match up perfectly. So if you look on this side, they're different, but they match up perfectly. So the rod bearings are marked standard, which is what I expected. Some scoring on them. But the good news is the journals on the crank actually look pretty good. You probably can't see down there, but with this camera, but they look pretty good, which is good because I'm not taking the crank out and having it reground. So if the block's not cracked, I might just put new rod bearings, sleeves, pistons, rings, and seals, and do a I guess what you would call a half-ass rebuild on this thing. Now that I've cleaned up this piston, this is number 1, cylinder number 1. You can see there's some scoring on there. Some of that's actually when I was twisting it to take it out. But on this side, there's definite signs of damage to the piston here. Where I'm pointing with my finger, this is all scored. So, kind of figured these pistons were junk anyways, but this one, same thing. Got a line of scoring on this side. A line of scoring on this side. That's this discoloration you see right here in scrapes.